Hello, welcome to TandL Talks, the podcast where we dive into the heart of teaching and learning in the Puyallup School District. I'm your host, Nancy, and I'm so glad you're here for this important discussion about inclusion in our schools, what it looks like, why it's important, and how we can create more opportunities for every student to feel a true sense of belonging in their school. In today's episode, I am joined by Lenzi Dean, who is a special education teacher and administrative intern at Shaw Road Elementary. She's been leading some exciting work around inclusion, focusing on how we can ensure that students from special programs like developmental kindergarten, support center, RAP, BEST, are spending more time with their peers in the general education setting. Through thoughtful collaboration, professional learning, and school-wide reflection, her team is working to break down barriers and create a more inclusive learning environment for all students. Inclusion is something that we often talk about in education, but making it a reality takes intentional effort, strong leadership, and a willingness to step outside of traditional models. Lenzi's work is a great example of how a school can take meaningful steps toward improving access and belonging for students with disabilities. I think her insights will be super helpful for anyone out there who's looking to do the same at their school. We'll hear about how she and her colleagues analyze their school's least restrictive environment data to identify gaps, the professional learning she's leading to build shared understanding, and how the team is co-creating their goals for the future. Plus, we'll talk about the power of mindset shifts, both for educators and students, and how simple, intentional changes can have a lasting impact. So whether you're a teacher, an administrator, or someone passionate about equity in education, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. And be sure to listen to the end of this podcast for your chance to win a gift for your classroom. Let's jump in and get started. Good morning and welcome to the clubhouse. Today we are talking with Lenzi Dean. She is a special ed developmental kindergarten teacher at Shaw Road Elementary, and she's doing some really exciting work around inclusion. So welcome to the TandL Clubhouse, Lenzi.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so this is my second year teaching developmental kindergarten. It's only my second year in the Puyallup School District, but my 10th year teaching. All of those spent in special ed, with the exception of 1 year as a behavior interventionist. Most of my experience has been in a resource, but I've kind of had a shift doing developmental kindergarten, which is a self-contained program.
Mm-hmm. And you're also doing an administrative internship this year.
Yes, I'm also an admin intern this year.
That's fabulous. Mm-hmm. That gives you a good perspective on the whole system, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about the inclusion work that you're doing. What inspired you to focus on inclusion at Shaw Road, and what are some of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, so I knew going into my internship year that I was going to have some projects that I needed to take on, and being a DK teacher, my passion is in special ed. So one of our CSIP goals is based on inclusion and increasing that sense of belonging with our students, and so I wanted to look at that specifically with our students who are in special programs, because Shaw Road has developmental kindergarten and also primary and intermediate support center. So I looked at some of our least restrictive environment data based off of all the kids, and also compared it to those in self-contained programs, and just noticed a really big discrepancy between how much time our students in those special programs were spending with their typical peers. And so I just kind of wanted to explore how we could create a little bit of change there and create more opportunities for our kids to be with their typically developing peers.
I love that the work you're doing is
tied to the CSIP, right? That speaks to a school-wide focus on inclusion and the importance of that. I love that. So how did you determine goals, and what changes are you hoping to see?
Yeah, so last year PSS shared some resources from the TIES Center. And so I kind of used that as a jumping off point for what we could do at Shaw Road. So I looked at some of those resources that they had, and they have a lot of great resources for like the why behind inclusion, and then also resources for planning between gen ed teachers and special ed teachers. But then I also wanted to incorporate some input and maybe like some videos about what could inclusion look like in our ideal world. And so I also incorporated some work from Dr. Shelley Moore, who's like the guru on all things inclusion. And so we're kind of marrying those two resources together. And the goals we're kind of creating together this year, because in the TIES Center, it has like this whole framework for how you can create better systems in your school. And so as the group who's chosen to like do this inclusion series with me, we're grading Shaw Road's systems on the rubrics from the TIE Center. So like we're looking at placement and settings, general ed curriculum, content and access, instructional practices, and then also student and system outcomes. And so once we grade those systems that we have in place, which we've done I think 2 so far, then that's going to kind of guide the work going into next year of like what are going to be our focus areas and what do we want to see once we get there. So we're kind of co-creating the goals right now.
Okay. That's exciting. All of the work sounds so exciting. I love it. So you're leading some professional learning with some staff in your building. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like I said, we're marrying some things from the TIES Center and also Shelley Moore. And I think like I'm really passionate about like building the basis for what we're doing and ensuring that all of us know like what our goals are for inclusion, even though we know that it could look different from a different school. And so a lot of what we're doing right now is building that foundation, and we're kind of operating off of Shelley Moore's guiding principles for inclusion, which are the 5 Ps that she shares.
Yes.
All students are presumed competent. All students are enrolled in and attending curricular classes in proximity to their peers. They're participating in learning with their peers. They have purposeful roles and responsibilities, and they're planned for. So each session that we have this year, we're kind of diving into one of those guiding conditions and discussing like what does that look like, what does it mean, and what could it look like in our classrooms as we move through the work.
I love Shelley Moore, and first of all, she's just entertaining to watch, right? If you haven't watched Shelley Moore's YouTube videos, I highly recommend. But I feel like she also breaks things down in a way that it's like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you hear about big concepts, it feels overwhelming. But you listen to Shelley, it's like, oh, okay, I understand how that can look in my classroom, in my school. It just makes it, the way she says things makes it more accessible.
Yeah, it makes it digestible whenever you're thinking about it. Definitely.
Yeah. So how has your team responded to the learning? Have you noticed any ahas that they've had or changes in their thinking?
Yeah, so my thinking has been changed a little bit based off some of the feedback that we've gotten. I think it was our very first session that we had this team together, we were talking about just like what we want to do and why we want to do it, because everyone chose to be there. So everyone has this desire to create inclusive spaces for our students. And while we were talking, some of the gen ed teachers said like, well, why don't we have the students in DK and Support Center in our classrooms on day one? And so I know me and some of the support center teachers were like, well, that's what we kind of wanted, but like as special ed teachers, we want to push, but we don't want to overwhelm gen ed teachers because we know there's so many students in the classroom. And so that was just really exciting to hear.
Yes.
Like, that's what we want. That's what we want our ideal to be. And so that was exciting because we have that space to have those conversations. And then we're not just assuming that, it's too overwhelming to have certain kids in your room. So that was really exciting to realize, like, we're on the same page. We all want the same things. And then we had a lot of conversations about how teachers don't want to say the wrong thing whenever we're talking about some differences in students whenever they're in the classroom. So that was really the stopping point for us. And so I wanted to think about how can I lead this team in having those challenging conversations that can seem really scary. And so I went to one particular kindergarten class and I read the book All My Stripes to them, and then we were able to talk about the story and then also relate it to the real life experiences that they were having in the classroom at the time. And so after we read that story, I showed a class picture of the students in my class, and the students were able to ask questions about why a student may not talk whenever they're asked a question, or why they may have some different movements because they're stimming and the kids don't know what that is. And so that was a great opportunity for them to ask questions because it came from a genuine place of curiosity and not knowing, and it wasn't malicious that they were treating kids differently in any way. They just didn't know.
Yeah. So the team that you're working with includes gen ed teachers, special ed teachers, paraeducators, specialists. How's this collaboration strengthened the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's great to have so many different voices at the table because they're able to add their perspective, and then it eventually just makes everything we're doing better. We're able to have the perspectives of paraeducators who are supporting specific students in a multitude of different classrooms and spaces. Gen Ed is able to share their perspective of how they're going to try to meet the needs of students with extensive support needs while also supporting everyone else in the class. Special ed teachers are able to share their specialty in creating accommodations and making things accessible. And then our ESA staff, they see kids in many different schools throughout the district, and so they're able to share things that are great things that they're seeing in other schools, so that we can mirror that as we can at Shaw. And so it's great to have the different perspectives and the roles and also just the different spaces that people are in. And we've really worked to create a space where people can be vulnerable and have those hard conversations, because we need to have those conversations about the very real challenges that exist whenever we're trying to make spaces more inclusive for kids with extensive support needs.
Right. And I always feel like in any situation, but this in particular, when we can problem solve one thing, it's going to benefit other kids, whether it's this here or down the road. If I can figure out how to make this work, I can make it work for other kids too, right?
And I think another big thing is just having the time and the space to have those conversations, because we know as educators that time is precious and we don't have enough of it. So to have this time specifically dedicated to that is really meaningful for everybody.
So Lenzi, if you were giving advice to another school who wanted to do some work around inclusion, what would you tell them to do?
I think one of the biggest things is to just try. We know that anytime we try something new, we're going to make mistakes along the way, and we may say the wrong thing, we may do the wrong thing, but I think having any type of action is better than just kind of sitting back, because then nothing's going to change. So we have so many educators in this district who are really passionate about making inclusive spaces and doing what's best for kids. And so I think we just have to use that to our advantage. Everyone wants what's best for kids, and so we have to just jump in when we can to create that change.
All right. If there are teachers who would, or principals who would like to explore inclusion in their building, could they reach out to you and find out more about what you're doing at
Absolutely. This has been like my passion project this year. So I love to talk about it, and I realize that it's going to take like multiple years to get the change that we want, but the more people we can have on board, the better.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Lenzi, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here in the TandL Clubhouse, and appreciate all the work that you're doing for kids at Shaw Road. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Wow, what an inspiring conversation with Lenzi Dean. I am so grateful for the work she's doing at Shaw Road Elementary and for her willingness to share Shaw Road's journey with us today. Their story is such a powerful reminder that inclusion isn't just a philosophy, it's an ongoing commitment to making sure that every student, regardless of ability, has access to meaningful learning experiences alongside their peers. One of the biggest takeaways for me from this conversation is the importance of collaboration. Inclusion doesn't happen in isolation. It requires general ed teachers, special ed teachers, paras, specialists, administrators, and families all working together toward a common goal. It's about creating a school culture where every student is seen, valued, and given the support they need to thrive. I also loved hearing about how Lenzi's team is using tools like the Ties Center framework and Shelley Moore's 5 Ps of inclusion to guide their work. These kinds of structured, research-based approaches help schools move beyond good intentions and into meaningful strategic action. I've included links to Shelley Moore's YouTube page and to the Ties Center in the description below if you want more information. One thing I found especially powerful was the shift in thinking that's happening at Shaw Road. The realization that inclusion doesn't have to be a struggle between competing interests, but rather an opportunity to reimagine how we support students in ways that work for everyone. If this episode resonated with you and you're wondering how to start or strengthen inclusion efforts in your own school, Lenzi's more than happy to connect. You can reach out to her to learn more about the steps she and her team at Shaw Road are taking, the resources they're using, and how they've built a collaborative process that brings people together. And if you're an educator who's already doing great work around inclusion, we would love to hear from you too. Every school has unique challenges and successes, and the more we share and learn from each other, the stronger our collective impact will be. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of TandL Talks. If you found today's conversation valuable, I encourage you to share it with a colleague, maybe a fellow teacher, an administrator, maybe your leadership team, anyone that is looking to make their school more inclusive for all students. Okay, TandLers, here it is. It's your opportunity to win a free prize. You heard Lenzi reference the book All My Stripes. Well, the first Puyallup educator who emails me, Nancy Strobel, will win a copy of this book for your own classroom. Until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep making a difference for kids. See you soon on TandL Talks.